Thanks for joining us on our webinar today. We're talking about GPS tracking, how you can use it to grow and improve your business. Over the next 20 minutes or so, we'll highlight some tips to ensure you're using tracking effectively. We'll be talking about how companies use tracking to benefit the whole team. We'll be talking about some of the different tracking options available on Okappy. And then we'll talk about some of the things to consider when looking at location data. So particularly what determines how and when locations get sent. To ensure this webinar runs smoothly, please can you ensure your microphones stay muted. I say every time I'm working from home, if my broadband does cut out, I'll try and reconnect. So please bear with me. Also, I've got 3 5-year-olds running around downstairs as well. So if one of them gate crashes, again, please just bear with me. If you do want the slides at the end of the webinar, let us know. Just a heads up, we're going to be taking a break next month, but we'll be back in September. We'll be talking about using advanced reporting to grow your business, how you can use dashboards, how you can link to Google Sheets, Microsoft Excel, and create live automatic updating dashboards. So sign up for that, avoid missing out. I think the last 2 webinars have been sold out, although I think it's a bit quieter today. Obviously it's nice hot weather outside. It's quite a focused talk, talking about GPS tracking. Previously we talked about VAT reverse charge. We talked about some things you might not know about Okappy. We talked about invoicing, how to get invoices paid quicker. And last month we talked about networking, both within Okappy and also on other platforms such as LinkedIn. And we were joined by Alex Lowe for that one. So that was an interesting event. If you do want any of the slides or videos from the previous webinars, let us know, or check out our events page where we've got a rundown of past events as well as future events, and you can get the slides and the videos from there as well. So if you are watching the recording today and you're not here in person, check the events page for previous events. Okay, so first, just a quick rundown. If you don't know what Okappy is or who Okappy is, Okappy is a business-to-business connected workforce management platform, which applies social and market networking technology to a real business need. The need to communicate and collaborate when working with employees, often at different locations, when working with multiple subcontractors, and when working for different clients. By connecting on Okappy, you can connect to your employees, your customers, and your subcontractors. You can send and receive jobs, and you can see the status of those jobs as they're updated by your engineers and subcontractors in real time. You can raise invoices at touch of a button, send them to your customers, and likewise, your subcontractors can raise invoices to you. You can also monitor and protect your employees and better schedule your jobs using GPS tracking. And that's what we're going to be talking and covering in detail today. So Okappy was actually born out of a vehicle tracking company a few years ago. And I've got a story to share which really highlighted to me how tracking can be beneficial to all employees rather than being seen as a big brother surveillance type thing to be feared. It was when I first started work. I used to go along with the installers and take the opportunity to see our customers. And I remember on one such visit a while ago now, I was sat high up in the cab of an articulated lorry while the installer was wiring in their tracking units. And as I was looking out across the yard, I saw one of the truckers come steaming over to the cab, a big meaty guy, tattoos all up his arm, and I was dreading what he was going to say. Anyway, next minute, door swings open, he gets in. As he was extending his arm, I was expecting an earful. So I was quite taken by surprise when he said, "Hey mate, I want to shake your hand. Since we started installing the trackers, our lives have improved no end. Before, we'd have the boss ringing up all the time, asking where we were, why we weren't at the next drop-off. Now it's peace and quiet. He knows where we are, so he's not constantly calling. So we can just get on with the job. It's bliss." And I think that's one of the key benefits of GPS tracking, that everyone can see the location of your engineers. So this means less stress and hassle for the office, trying to figure out where you are or whether you're stuck in traffic. And it means less stress and hassle for the engineers. They can get on with their work without having to field lots of calls from the office. Have you done this? Have you done that? Where are you? Why are you not at the next job? Depending on the tracking device, you can also save fuel. So one of the benefits is cost saving and fuel saving. And you can do that through better monitoring of routes taken, through monitoring things like idling times, stationary times. One of the big costs, particularly with larger vehicles, so articulated lorries, tankers, is the amount of fuel they use when they're just sat there idling. And they have big batteries, so there's no need for them to idle. The driver's got all the power that they need from the batteries. Often they just forget to turn the ignition off, and it's liters of fuel every hour that's being used. One of the other benefits we hear a lot about is improvements to customer service. And I'm sure some of you have had the experience of an irate customer ringing up because your engineer's not turned up. Without tracking, this would often mean having to call the customer back while you tried to figure out where your guy was. With tracking, you can see straight away his last known location. So depending on settings, you can potentially even see whether he's stuck in traffic. So this means you can provide a proactive response to your customers' queries rather than fobbing them off and have to call them back later. Lone worker protection is also important for many roles, and often it's a legal requirement, particularly if your guys are working on their own or if they're in a remote or difficult location. They can set tracking whilst they're on site and send messages back to base if there's a problem. Having an audit log of when engineers get on site or leave site is also often critical. Some customers demand it. Even when they don't, it's often useful if weeks later there's a dispute about an invoice, about the timing. A lot of times by that time, that information is long forgotten. So lone worker protection is obviously a benefit in the audit trail as well. So Okappy, we offer 3 types of tracking device. The most prevalent obviously is our mobile application, which can provide location updates back to the system in real time. This is available as part of our standard subscriptions. The only potential cost is the location data. However, we've done a lot of work around what data gets sent, how it gets sent, and really minimizing the amount of data. So in most cases, it's well within the 3 minutes. The middle device on this slide is our install tracker. This is typically used when tracking is critical. So having a dedicated installed device where its sole purpose is to get the location and vehicle data and transmit whenever it can. It means there's less risk of the battery running out if it's plugged into the vehicle or being low. And having a separate active antenna also means it can get a better fix on its location, so using GPS, which can help. The installed units also can take a feed from the alarm or ignition, which can provide more accurate reporting, particularly around when the vehicle is idling or if it's stationary. We do have a portable option as well, where typically the information is not so critical, vehicle information. This can still work out whether the vehicle is stationary or just transmit when it moves, but it's worked out based on the location rather than directly from the vehicle, which means it's not always as accurate. However, what it loses in terms of accuracy, it more than makes up for in terms of ease of use, flexibility, and cost. It doesn't require installation. It can be simply placed on the dashboard, although it can be installed as well if required. Just in terms of cost, the portable is a one-off price per unit. You can use your own SIMs, or we can provide SIMs, including all the data for £10 plus VAT per month. For the installed units, there's a one-off cost, and then the data is £15 plus VAT per month, and professional installation, if required, is £75 plus VAT per vehicle. As I said, the mobile app, it's included as part of these monthly subscriptions, and there's no cost for using that. So when you've got your tracking devices, there's different ways that you can track using Okappy. you have control over how and when the location information is sent. And the spectrum really goes from left with turning tracking off completely to having tracking on all the time, so tracking always. Depending on the tracking device or its settings, that could be updated as often as every 15 seconds, although every couple of minutes tends to be good enough and what most people use. If you don't need the location all the time, then you can leave tracking off by default, but then turn it on for a specific time, i.e. when your guys are at a particular site, if they're working overnight, particularly for that lone worker aspect. Alternatively, you can just store the location and timestamp when the job is updated. I'll show you how to set that in a bit. And that may be required by your own customers, or it might be useful as an audit trail to answer questions or protect against disputes down the line. So how do you set when locations are sent? So you have control over various settings, both from within the app and from the web portal. From within the app, to go to the settings screen in both iOS and Android, click the Okappy icon, then click More, and then Tracking Settings. This is the iOS screen. The Android screen, it's similar, slightly different, but kind of this gives a good idea of what it looks like. The device name is shown at the top, and that's what you see on the radar screen, both from within the app and on the web. Please note that if the app is deleted and reinstalled, then this could result in you seeing the app twice. You can show, hide, or delete apps from the web, and again, I'll show you that in a sec. Next, you've got the unique key, which we use to debug issues. It's also how the system determines whether it's a new device. Unfortunately, both Apple and Google really focusing on privacy nowadays. The unique ID can often change from time to time, even on the same device. And that's also a reason why you sometimes see multiple devices set up on the system, even if you're only expecting one to show. If the device doesn't have a network connection, then the device, you can set it to store locations in memory and send them from oldest through to newest once it does have a connection. You can determine how many locations for the app will start overwriting the location. You can also set on iOS whether the application sends its location based on data, even if you choose to send based on time. If the device hasn't moved, then the app won't be allowed to send another location. And this is determined by the operating system. It's outside the control of the app. There's another couple of options which are not shown on the screenshot, but if you were to scroll down, there's an option to always track. So you can have the app track by default. So as soon as you open the app, it starts tracking. You can also turn on whether the application stays open. And that's particularly useful if you've got your hands full, but you want to keep the display on. So you can read job details, job updates, or messages without having to keep tapping on the screen. From all the mobile devices, you can see whether the device is trying to send its location or not by the color of the Okappy icon at the top left of the screen. On the left, you can see the app is trying to send its location, whereas on this one, it's switched off. If you do want to turn tracking on or off, then again, click the Okappy icon. If it's already on, that will say stop sending locations. Click that and it will stop tracking. If it's switched off, it'll say start sending locations, switch it, and it'll start obviously sending locations. If the app is set to track by default, you can still turn it off, say if your engineers are at home or not working, if it's at the weekend, let's say. It'll stop tracking. And then when they're back in work on Monday, they turn the app on, it will start tracking again by default. And the idea of showing when it's tracking or not, it's for privacy, it's for permissions, it's giving control to you guys to know when the app is trying to send its location. Back in the office, you can see the location of all your devices on the radar screen. Just to note, the radar screen, it shows the latest location. So if the device hasn't transmitted for whatever reason, or if it's transmitted but it hasn't got a good location, it's not got GPS, then it will show that last known location of that device. And I'll talk in a bit about some of the reasons why it might show an out-of-date location, even if you think it should be tracking. You can click on any of the icons, and that will open the settings for the app and show the latest details. From there, you can zoom into street or town level, or zoom out to country, or see an overview of all your devices. You've also got settings there, so you can change the device name. So for example, you could have Richard's iPhone, Richard's tablet, and you can also show or hide the devices if you want to, that's particularly useful if you want to focus on specific devices, or if an engineer's got multiple devices and two aren't being used. On the left, you've got three icons. Again, you can show and hide those by clicking the little orange ribbon at the bottom. If you click that, the icons show. The top one in particular is useful. Click on that, you can see all your list of devices. If you click on, or if you hover over the device names, it also shows you when they last transmitted. And then click on the device, it will zoom into that particular one. As I said before, you can also see or set the app to show the time and location when the job was updated. To see that, if you, from within the job screen, click on the three dots menu next to the relevant job and then view changelog. That will bring up the changelog window. You can see each of the updates to the job. You can see who updated it. And if tracking is on, you can see the location, so the latitude and longitude. Clicking on that, that will open the position in Google Maps. So you can see on the map where that job was updated. You can also get directions to and from that location. To turn the settings on or off the job to capture the time and the location, if you go to the connection screen, go to the employees tab, select the relevant employee, and then click the three dots and then employee settings. That will open the employee settings window. If you scroll down, you've got the option near the bottom, save location with timestamp when job's updated. If you check that, then that's when the location will get saved with the timestamp. Leave it off and it'll just be the time and the person that updated it. Also within the web, you've got various reports. Some of them are more relevant if you've got the installed devices or the portable devices, such as the stationary times, idling times. But you can see tracks, speeding times, latest activity for all the devices. Probably the most useful in terms of the settings and understanding how your account's set up is the vehicle device details report. That shows you all your list of devices. You can see the device name, the device type, and what version of the software they've got. We always say, particularly with the app, to turn automatic updates on as we release bug fixes, improvements, or just as the operating system changes and we have to release updates because of that. It's always good to make sure you've got the latest version of the app. You can also see whether the device is visible from this report as well, and show or hide devices. And again, depending on the device, you can set the tracking settings from here as well. You can also delete devices. So if you do have multiple devices that have been set up, like if you're not using them anymore, or if the ID's changed and you've got a duplicate device, click the cross and that will delete the device off the system. And you don't need to worry about deleting devices if you're not sure which is the right one to delete. The system does create the devices automatically. So if you have deleted a device and actually it's still in use, the next time it transmits, the system will automatically set it back up onto your account. And this is also why you sometimes get multiple devices for the same person if the ID is changed, or if they're logging on with different devices, iPhone, iPad, and that's when you can see multiple devices. Although obviously you can change the device name, make it a bit clearer, like Richard's iPad, Richard's iPhone, for example. So in terms of some of the questions we get around why devices are not transmitting, or you're expecting them to transmit, or they haven't, you set them to transmit by default, but they're not transmitting. Privacy is an increasingly important issue, and it is one that both Apple and Google are taking seriously. Apple in particular are really focusing on it and kind of giving more power to the permissions. App will try and get the location and send the location, but ultimately it's down to the phone, the device's operating system. So if your engineers turned off permissions for whatever reason, either on purpose or they just didn't realize, then the app won't be able to send its location. Also, if there's no network, then obviously the device won't be able to transmit its location. If it doesn't have GPS, say it's underground, it can't get a fix on its location, then again it will send a location, but it will be out of date. If the battery is low, that's a kind of particular issue, especially if on iOS, if the battery status shows as yellow or red, then the operating system really throttles what the apps will do. And GPS being the biggest use of power, that's obviously the first, or often the first thing that will get cut off. So battery, network, permissions is some of the things to kind of be wary of, even if you kind of think our app settings are switched on and it should be transmitting. We do have a troubleshooting guide which you can use to work out if you're expecting a location it's not being sent. You can use that, and that will take you through step by step to see what's causing the device not to send its location. And I'll include a link to that at the end of the presentation. It's also important to note that subcontractors aren't tracked on Okappy. In Okappy kind of parlance, a subcontractor is actually a company and could have multiple engineers working for that company. So even if they've only got one, because you can't see the locations of other employees from other companies, then it doesn't store, you can't see the location of those guys. Although obviously, if they turn tracking on themselves, and particularly if they turn the job options settings to on, then you will be able to see in the change log for the job the location and time that job was updated, even if it was done by a subcontractor. Just in terms of permissions then, on iOS, to turn permissions on or off, or to make sure they're turned on. On iOS, the easiest way to get to the app settings is from within Okappy. Click the Okappy icon, click More, and then click Device Settings for the app. Android is a bit more convoluted. It depends on your particular phone or version of Android. But in most cases, if you open the Settings app, click on Apps, and then find Okappy, and then you can go to all the settings from there. We always suggest to keep all the settings switched on. That just gives the app more flexibility. It makes it kind of more clear what's going on. You can control all the settings from within the app anyway. Likewise, on iOS, you've got the option to have it tracking always, just when the app's on, or never. Again, we suggest always having it so it's always tracking. Although obviously you still got the control from within the app, you can see whether it's trying to send its location or not. Having all these set on, it just makes it easier to see what's going on. So most of the way through now. So just a quick recap. We talked about some of the benefits of tracking, i.e. reducing mileage and fuel costs, providing proactive customer service, increasing productivity of your engineers through less interruptions, and the lone worker aspect. We talked about different tracking options and different tracking devices. So the options ranging from turning tracking off completely to having it always tracking, and then a couple of options in between. Then finally, we talked about some of the issues which may mean that the device doesn't transmit, including low power, no GPS, no network, or a user turning off permissions, which is becoming more prevalent with the changes that both Apple and Google have been introducing. As always, there's a lot of help and support on our website. So if you go to Okappy.com support, 3 articles here in particular are useful. This is the troubleshooting guide that I mentioned earlier. But there's lots of questions and answers on the support site. There's lots of kind of small videos, short self-explanatory videos. So thanks once again for attending our webinar. Hope you found it useful. Happy to take any questions now if you want to send them through in the chat. If I've got a couple here, if we don't get through all of them, we'll respond back by email afterwards. Just a reminder, our next topic is going to be about advanced reporting. That's going to be on the 22nd of September. Our last couple of webinars have sold out, although this one is a bit quieter. But yeah, if you check us out on Eventbrite, make sure you kind of don't miss out on those tickets. Or check out our events page from our Okappy website. Look for the news at the top and then events. You can see all our previous events, all our future events. And from there, you can download slides and get the videos of past events if any of you kind of didn't manage to attend. Yeah, just seeing if there's any questions. So I've just got one here. And so, well, what is the most likely reason for a device not transmitting? So I guess not transmitting when you're expecting it to transmit. It really does depend on how your guys are using their phones. Having a low battery is probably the biggest cause of tracking being reduced or stopped altogether. Both Apple and Google really throttle the device's capability if the battery is low. By that I mean on iOS, as I said, the icon being yellow or red. Permissions also is increasingly a reason that devices can stop tracking. It's so easy to turn off nowadays, either intentionally or by mistake. Apple in particular is really pushing the privacy and putting up more and more alerts with the option to turn the permissions off, which unfortunately means it's a lot more likely that they will get turned off. Even Google tends to be more free around privacy, is facing pressures from various regulators around the world, and it's being forced to provide more options to increase permissions. Yeah, so on that, I was got, is there any way around permissions? Well, the way around it is you can purchase what is known as mobile device management software, MDM software, for typically company phones, and that allows you to control and restrict what the phone does. It's typically a service that companies offer for a fee per device, often when they sell the device, when they sell the phones, so mobile phone companies. With that installed, you can determine which apps are shown or not. So you could turn off the settings app, and that allows you to kind of restrict the ability to turn off permissions. Failing that, though, we find it's the companies that have the strong and trusting relationships with their employees, they're the ones that have the least issues. Companies that are using tracking to benefit everyone rather than using it to kind of spy on employees, the ones that find tracking most effective. At the end of the day, there's never a completely foolproof way to ensure tracking is on. We've heard stories about employees sticking phones in metal boxes or even just turning them off to avoid locations being sent. So when we do training with companies and their engineers, often we'll talk about the benefits of tracking, and we'll show them how they can see whether locations are being sent. And I think by selling the benefits and reducing the fears of spying, I think that's often the key to ensure effective tracking. I think just a couple of minutes left, so just time for one more question. Do you offer any call center or monitoring type service, or would you consider it? Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. It's certainly something we have considered. It's something we are looking at the moment with another company. The idea we're talking about would be having a button within the app, which when pressed would alert a call center, which would be there 24/7. they'd check the phone and call the engineer to see if they're okay, and then potentially keep that line open while that engineer was working. So again, from a lone worker perspective, that might be quite useful. It would likely be an optional extra paid service. I'll say it is something that we're looking at. If it is something that you're interested in, then yeah, let us know, and we'll kind of push it up the priorities. Cool. Okay, so yeah, thanks once again for attending. The video for this will be available on our website in the next day or so. We'll send a quick survey out to all attendees later. Always interested in your feedback, what worked, what didn't, and thoughts on future webinars. But yeah, otherwise I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on the 22nd of September, where we'll be talking about advanced reporting, automatic dashboards, how to do that within Okappy. So cool. Thanks for attending, and see you at the next one. Cheers.